All right, ladies and gentlemen, Chapter 19 is not an incredibly long one. It's more of a cultural chapter, so I'll try to go through this one pretty quickly with you. Uh, the title is Immigration, Urbanization, and Everyday Life. We are still in the period from 1860 to 1900, about 40 years. And to be honest with you, this is more of a chapter about the cities, northern immigration. Remember, through 1860 to 1865, there's a civil war going on. From 65 to 1870, 1877, Reconstruction is happening, westward expansion is happening. So again, like I say, these several chapters here are all happening at the same period in American history, just very different themes. All right, so as I've done for the last few videos, I'm going to focus on the chronology and just kind of hit some high points for you. Be sure you're reading, pay attention to the details, but hopefully this will set things in context. 1865, Vassar College becomes one of the colleges of the period to really open its doors to many new students. It's one of a number of them that begins to be much more inclusive. For example, we start to see colleges opening up that welcomes African American students, welcomes women, for example, and I believe Vassar is one of those. In 1869, we see the first intercollegiate football game. Football begins to become a popular sport. Of course, it won't be professional for quite some time. 1872, Anthony Comstock is going to found an organization called the New York Society for the Suppression of Vice. So let's define what vice is. Vice would be, in the words of the day, even maybe words of today, sort of a sin or something that goes against the morals of society of its time. So in this case, it might have been gambling, drinking perhaps, that sort of a thing, prostitution maybe. So Anthony Comstock in New York is pushing for basically laws against these sorts of things. Comstock will also be behind a law which will ban the mailing of materials that have any regard to sex. In fact, Margaret Sanger, who would go on to found Planned Parenthood, was at one point arrested under the Comstock law for sending out mailers dealing with birth control. So very different time, very different views on the world in 1872. 1873, John Wanamaker opens up his Philadelphia department store. Think about what's happening in 1873. For the past 10 years or so, society has the economy has boomed. Factories have opened up. Many of the factories that had produced materials for the Northern Army during the Civil War have now converted to consumer goods, consumer products, and immigration has been a tremendous factor at this period of time. And as far as workload is concerned, workers, human capital if you prefer, and we've got to market these products. As the economy continues to boom, as more and more people are becoming more and more wealthy, we see the opening of new ways to market those products, and John Wanamaker's Philadelphia department store is one of them. 1875, some other colleges open their doors, like Smith College, Wellesley College, and also they're going to be front and center in opening its doors to new opportunities for folks that aren't necessarily only white and only male. In 1876, the National Baseball League is organized. Baseball had gotten its sort of start in America through a couple of sports, one called rounders or town ball. And these were very popular, especially in northern towns. As soldiers went off to war in 1861 through 1865, they took their town ball with them. And they all had different rules, and it caused some fights within the camps. As a matter of fact, General Abner Doubleday is often credited with the formation of modern baseball when he got tired of his soldiers fighting over the rules. So it's said that he sat down and wrote rules that they could all agree on, and that became the basis of modern baseball. Some of the first teams: New York Yankees, Boston Red Stockings, yes, that's the Boston Red Sox, Cincinnati Reds, were some of the first national baseball teams, and they resulted from some of these games that the soldiers had played in camp between battles and in between drills. In 1880, William Booth's followers are going to establish an American branch of the Salvation Army, a church that's based very much on the ideas of the social gospel. William Booth is from England, but he was a very influential preacher, and it was based on service. And so every year after about Thanksgiving to Christmas, you see the red kettles and the bell ringers. Salvation Army is still alive and well. 1881, Josephine Shaw Lowell is going to open the New York Charity Organization Society. And I don't know much about this organization in detail, except it seems to me like possibly a version of like the United Way, where there's a number of charities working in the city, and it was intended to coordinate amongst those charities. That's sort of what I think the New York Charity Organization Society, or the COS, was intending to do. So hopefully you're seeing a theme. We're seeing colleges opening up. We're seeing new distractions, and like in the form of baseball, football. We're seeing laws which are trying to modify behavior in some ways as well. And we're seeing churches and wealthy individuals begin to look out for those that are less fortunate than themselves. So this is all sort of what this chapter is dealing with. 1884, Huckleberry Finn is written by Mark Twain. And if you read Huckleberry Finn, it really is a critique of sort of some of the racial disparities that's happening within the states at the time in the aftermath of the Civil War. Stanford University is founded in 1885, largely with money that had been made in the building of the Transcontinental Railroad. Leland Stanford was one of the four investors of the Central Pacific Railroad out of California. 1889, Jane Addams and Ellen Gates Starr opens up what is called a settlement house, Hull House in Chicago. And this was a charity house. If it cost you anything to stay there, it wasn't much. It was open mainly for immigrants. It was a low-cost or free place for you to stay. Child care was offered. Medical care was offered. English classes would be offered at night for those that needed it to help you get ahead, to assimilate, to adapt to life in America, especially in cities like Chicago, which at the time was the second largest city in the United States. In 1890, the University of Chicago is founded. Actually on the site of the old prisoner of war camp, Camp Douglas, in the city of Chicago. Basketball is invented at Springfield College, Massachusetts. James Naismith, I believe, was the inventor of the game. Worked for the YMCA in Springfield, Massachusetts. He was looking for a game that could be played indoors when there's snow on the ground, and he nailed a couple of peach baskets on the wall, came up with the game, and it took off in popularity. In 1892, Ellis Island Immigration Center opens up, and it will remain open until about 1942, 1943, about 50 years, and many millions would come through from Europe. In fact, there's a fantastic song about Ellis Island that Celtic Woman sings. Just go look it up on YouTube. It's called Isle of Hope, Isle of Tears, and it's about the first young woman that came through at Ellis Island. So go look that up. It might be worth your time. We see the General Federation of Women's Clubs will be organized. Again, this is an era of associations. More and more people are donating their time to groups, especially middle class, upper class, that can afford to spend a little extra time and a little extra money in things that they care about. 1895, Coney Island Amusement Park opens in Brooklyn, New York. In 1880 and in 1899, we're seeing several cultural sort of topics come on. Scott Joplin, he's a black musician, piano player. Ragtime was very popular. It's a precursor to the jazz of the 1920s. Scott Joplin becomes one of the first sort of superstars of that music genre of that period of time. Kate Chopin writes The Awakening in 1899, and it's more or less sort of a feminist commentary of the time period, a comment on sort of women's place within society. And it's very critical, and many of the writers and novelists and other authors of the time period are going to write along very similar themes, just maybe not with the same focus in mind. Thorstein Veblen is going to write the theory of the leisure class, and again, some criticism going on about the wealthy versus the more poor individuals. And some of the writings of Marx are sort of taken off, especially as we start to see northern industry factories are growing, and just the conditions that some of the poorer workers are living in. 1900, Theodore Dreiser writes Sister Carrie. Again, it's another commentary of the time. The National Association of Colored Women's Clubs are organized, so we have sort of an African American counterpart to some of those women's groups that we mentioned before. And in 1910, Angel Island Immigration Center opens up in San Francisco. So this is not the last you're going to hear on these topics. I think we'll get into a little bit more about immigration as we move through, but be sure you've read. Look at those things like factors, pull factors, old immigration, new immigration. All of these are going to be very alive and well, but I think they actually sort of transcend into future chapters, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time here. But be sure you're reading this, be sure you're looking over it. One of the best movies of the time that I would recommend, seriously, dealing with the immigration and just sort of society at the time, a cartoon from the 1990s called An American Tale. It really is good. If you haven't seen it, you might check that out. And another one you might want to see is Gangs of New York. It takes place during the 1860s, actually during the Civil War in the city of New York, but it has a commentary on nativism, some of the causes of the war as well. So anyway, those are a few things that you might, if you have a little bit of time while you're sitting around and looking for things to do, there's a couple of films you might hop onto Netflix or and see if you can't find them. All right, take care. This one's a little shorter than normal. That's a good thing, I guess. Reach out to me if you've got comments, questions, or concerns. I'll see what I can do for you. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.